Hello and welcome to the Aussie Football Passport. And this week we have a little bit of a different episode, and I'm joined by a special guest, longtime friend and podcaster, Scott from the Brisbane Football Review. How are you, Scott?
Good to be here with you, Alex. Long-time listener, first-time podcaster. Good to be with you.
Yeah. Yes, very good to have you, Scott. So, look, first of all, I might get you to give us a little plug where our listeners can find your wonderful podcast, the Brisbane Football Review.
So if you are looking to find us at the Brisbane Football Review, you can search for us on socials, Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, all those good social media platforms. You can find us on there. Our podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, and a bunch of others. Currently, we're in our A-League mode. So our A-League shows out each and every week during the A-League men's and women's season. Our Queensland football show, that will be back in early 2026, where we look at the NPL, the Queensland Cup, and all the local football going on around the state of Queensland. So you can keep an eye out for those on your podcasting platforms over the next couple of weeks, Alex.
Yeah, brilliant. And highly recommend, of course, where all of our Socceroos and Matildas start at state level. And of course, Scott and the team at Brisbane Football Review do a wonderful job of covering the local game, which is well worth checking out, folks. But anyway, let's have a chat about the Socceroos. And today we're going to talk about the year in review. The Socceroos had a wonderful year and basically first automatic World Cup qualification for the first time since 2009, which is quite refreshing instead of going through the nail-biting, hair-pulling qualification sudden death phase that we seem to have, for quite a while now. But so the March international window, we had wins against Indonesia 5-1 at home in Sydney and then away to China 2-0. And in that first game in particular, Scott, we won 5-1, but I thought that in fact Indonesia outplayed us, but we seemed to get a 5-1 win. So I mean, let us know your thoughts, Scott, on that game.
Well, I think the big thing is first about that game, it was the first game of the Patrick Kluivert era for Indonesia, wasn't it? They were really starting to double and triple down on the Dutch route in Indonesia in terms of trying to strengthen their national team, and that did work quite well for them getting as far as they did in World Cup qualifying. But from the Socceroos perspective, I think they got a couple of early goals in that game and looked pretty good in creating those chances. And then after that, it was very much Indonesia getting on top of the game. Of course, they did have the penalty very early on in the game, and it could have been completely different if they did convert that opportunity very early in the game. I think attacking-wise, we saw probably little bits of what we would see under Tony Popovic going for. Nishan Vui play, I think he had a really good game on that night from memory as well down there in Sydney. But it was a game where Australia just simply had to win, wasn't it? After the slip-up in Indonesia earlier in the qualifying, the slip-up at home to Bahrain, there was no room for error. They had to win the game, and they did pretty well to win the game, but there were signs all wasn't 100% rosy going into the rest of qualifying. Although that was probably the lesser performance or the worst of the four performances in World Cup qualifying, because the three following, which we'll talk about, I think they were probably all levels up on that.
Yeah, 100%. And it was, as you said, I guess maybe because the pressure was on and as you said, Patrick Kluivert had put together basically the Dutch third string side, if you like, with that Indonesia side, and they knew exactly how they wanted to play, and they came here and they did it. But yeah, the scoreline just didn't reflect what they did. I mean, that penalty was quite soft, but anyway, let's not get hung up on that because we did win 5-1. But that China game, I think for me, what really stood out with that one, again, the pressure was on. It was away. And it was a really clinical performance. But there's two midfielders in that game that really stood out to me, and that was Ryan Teague, who of course was on the list for China to actually try and get nationalised or play in the team at the very least, the national side. But Jackson Irvine with an absolute captain's knock up there in China, a wonderful performance, and I'm sure you'll agree with me there.
Yeah, they were the two best players on the field for the Socceroos in that game up there in China. Ryan Teague making his debut in that game, the Melbourne Victory as he was then, midfielder, now playing overseas. He had a sensational game on debut, as you said, could have gone and played for China. Luckily for Australia, he's a part of our team going forward for the next decade or so, because that was a really good performance from him in midfield. And Jackson Irvine, in away games like this that are must, when you need your big players to step up, whether it's club or country, and Jackson Irvine certainly did that in this game. And I thought it was a really professional road win from a Tony Popovic side, which he's been accustomed to doing in Asia with the Western Sydney Wanderers. It was a cut and paste job from what he'd done through their Asian Championship campaign a decade or so ago. That was a really good performance, but I just watching it, I couldn't believe that how awful ordinary China were in this game. For I know the population theory argument gets blown out of proportion at times, but they have a lot of people to choose from. They put a lot of money into their football, and they just can't seem to find a way to win games like this or to get close in games like this. And I think that's the step China need to take. But from an Australian perspective, I thought we were really, really, really impressive in that game.
Yeah, it was a really professional performance, as you said, and really effective. Both of those games were really effective in front of goal, and Ryan Teague in particular. You thought, oh wow, we've found a really good player, and unfortunately, things just didn't seem to work from there on in. I mean, the rest of his A-League season was outstanding, as we saw for Melbourne Victory as they went on to the grand final. But from there, he got his move to Belgium, and it's just not quite worked out for him there. But I wanted to pick up your point about Tony Popovic knowing how to do it in Asia, particularly the Western Sydney Wanderers going away to Saudi Arabia and winning the Asian Champions League, and leads us on perfectly to the next two games where the pressure was on again for automatic qualification. And they did the business, the lads, didn't they? Going over to Perth to play Japan, getting a 1-0 win, and then going to Saudi and beating them in their own backyard 2-1, nothing to be sneezed at, and securing World Cup qualification automatically for the first time since 2009, as we said at the top of the show. It was two really incredible performances. But let's start with the game in Perth, of course, remembered for that wonderful Aziz Behich strike on his weaker foot, and probably the man of the year, you'd almost say, wouldn't you, Scott?
Certainly, Socceroos of the Year potentially with a moment like that. It goes right there with Josh Kennedy's header in Sydney. Mila Jedinak's penalty in Sydney. Won't put it with the heroics of 2005 at this stage. All the stuff in Qatar with Andrew Redmayne, but in terms of the moments for Australian football, that was certainly right up there. The funny thing is about the game is it was a Japanese side, which was, I won't say second string, but it was slightly experimental in terms of they had a lot of players that were trying out for see what they could build their depth for the World Cup and Asian Cup coming up. And funny thing is, I actually thought they probably outplayed Australia in large parts of that game. They just had their quintessential problem is they don't score enough goals. They don't take the chances that they create. And in football, if you don't take your chances, eventually the opposition will get at least one chance. It took Australia until the 93rd minute to get that chance. It was a great moment over there in Perth. It almost set it up then perfectly, didn't it? At that point, it was almost assured Australia were going to qualify. And just one last step in Saudi Arabia. It's funny, though, we're talking about Tony Popovic. His best performances in this campaign have all been on the road when you think about it. The home games have been more dicey than the away games.
They have, yeah. You're spot on there, because you look at, I mean, yes, again, going back to that Indonesia game, we won 5-1, but it was really ordinary performance from the Socceroos. But then, the very next game after the Japan win was to Saudi Arabia, and we beat them 2-1 in their own backyard. And Matt Ryan pulled off an absolute masterclass in goal. I think it was a significant cap from him. Was his 100th cap from memory, something like that?
I think it was around that as well. Yeah, he's only 8 lines away from the record, so that'd be about right.
Yeah, so I mean, he pulled off an absolute masterclass, and in fact, little did we know I think it was his last game as the starting goalkeeper from there. And I think Paul Itzo took the chain, but the starting spot. But we'll get on to that later. But again, a wonderful performance on the road, as you said. It's Tony Popovic just seems to produce these sides that have that siege mentality where they go away and they're able to do the business away from home rather than at home, which is rather bizarre, isn't it?
It is rather bizarre, but that was satisfyingly professional, the way I would describe that game. It was incredibly professional. Though they went to Saudi Arabia. They needed a huge win, obviously, to try and get themselves into the automatic qualification spot. They did go ahead in the game and thought, maybe something could happen here. So I think they scored in the first 15, 20 minutes or so, but after that, Australia settled down, got themselves back into the game. Connor Metcalfe, who I have to admit I'm not the biggest fan of in that role, but that was by far and away his best game in an Australia shirt, got them back into it. And then there was the head up from Mitch Duke later on in the second half that did get them the win. And you mentioned the save from Matt Ryan, and might get onto it later on, but that save could have been absolutely crucial in determining whether or not Australia got pot 2 or pot 3 for the World Cup draw. Obviously, they did get pot 2, but if they had drawn that game, maybe they wouldn't have. So that save, it was important to get the win in Saudi Arabia for that moment to be even more special than it would have been with a draw. But looking ahead to the World Cup, it could have been the most important moment of the whole campaign.
Yeah, again, and it's one that probably gets overshadowed quite a bit by, of course, the Aziz Behich goal in Perth. But you're 100% right, Scott. It was a crucial save and a real, I don't like using the word, but I'm going to use it, renaissance from Matt Ryan that year. I mean, you got to remember he was at Roma before the January transfer window last year, and he made the move to Lens in France. And got the starting spot because they sold their keeper in a weird twist of fate. He got the starting spot and had an absolutely outstanding half a season at Lens, and that was what really propelled him back into the Socceroos frame for the beginning. And then, of course, Lens actually didn't renew his contract, but by the by, that performance was outstanding. And again, talking about senior players standing up, that really was Matt Ryan, Captain Matt Ryan, doing his thing. But I guess that kind of leads us on to the next point around the friendlies, because that was it for Matt Ryan for the year. He was in, I think, two of
I think he
the.
played the game against the United States as well.
He
That might be the friendly he played.
did. You're right. Yes, you're right. So, I mean, we did get one more game from Matt Ryan, but it was largely the Paul Izzo show from there. And I must say, he was very impressive, bar the Colombia game that we'll talk about later on. But yeah, I don't know what your thoughts were on Paul Izzo's performances in the friendlies to follow, but Matt Ryan's definitely got some competition on his hands now.
He does have some competition on his hands, no doubt about that. I don't think anyone played well against Colombia, so I'm not going to hold that one
Mm.
against him. But I think the rest of the games, he was pretty competitive, wasn't he? He's playing over there in Europe now. He's obviously a Tony Popovic, former player at Melbourne Victory. He knows Paul Izzo. He knows what he can do. So I can certainly picture that being a real battle between him and Matt Ryan for those minutes going ahead into the World Cup. The interesting thing will be he did also give Pat Beach a game in one of the more recent games as well.
Mm.
He's doing really well in the A-League. So I do wonder if he's going to be the next young goalkeeper in the mix. Not like when Mark Schwarzer was finishing up, Matt Ryan was in the squad, and then he usurped everybody and became the new number one. I do wonder if Patrick Beach is on that path, but for the World Cup, it does feel like it is going to be a battle between those two, Izzo and Matt Ryan. And I tend to think at the moment Matt Ryan probably does have the experience and the edge on that score. I think he'll also have that real determination factor. If I have to remember what happened in that Argentina game, I don't want to go back to it too much, but
Mm.
I'm sure that moment will certainly make him want to get back to the World Cup and redeem himself. So I do think he'll have that burning desire to get there, and it'll be a contest between those two.
Yeah, completely agree. And you can obviously argue as well that Matt Ryan's playing at the higher level, of course, playing in La Liga in Spain for Levante, whereas Paul Izzo playing in Denmark for Randers. I guess there's a bit of a gap there where, Matt Ryan's facing blokes like Kylian Mbappe and Antoine Griezmann, whereas, I mean, yeah, look, no offense to Danish strikers, and not quite the same level. So Matt Ryan's probably getting his keeping skills sharpened. But what I do want to, I guess, talk about, and Patrick Beach, yeah, one for the future. You'd imagine that he will be the next, I guess, Matt Ryan, if you like, and will probably usurp both Matt Ryan and Paul Izzo for that factor. But yeah, so we I guess, Scott, I just wanted to pull up your point on there about Tony Popovic sides and really the players that he picked for those qualification games were ones that he knew and trusted. But once we got to the friendlies in the following windows in September, October, November, there was a lot of experimentation, and I can't remember the exact figure of how many players there were. I think it was sort of, upwards of 50 odd players that he's used so far in his tenure in total. But a lot of that happened in these friendlies, and we saw some out and out experimentation, players getting called into the squads and not even playing. We've seen Nectar Triantis, of course, defect to Greece, and there's still a couple of whispers on other players that might do that. But I guess with that, the players that took their chances, we've talked about Paul Izzo, but another one that I wanted to talk about briefly, and I think this position is still wide open, is in the striking department. But Mo Toure was the one that really stood out for me, particularly the New Zealand series. I thought that's what won him the favour with Tony Popovic, and that's why we saw him in the following squads. I don't know if you felt the same, Scott.
Just quickly, it was 67 players Tony Popovic has
Wow.
called up in this era since right back to the end of the previous year as well. 46 of those have played. So certainly you feel hard done by if you haven't been included, at least in the extended squad, as you mentioned. But I'd agree with you about Mo Toure. He probably was the standout player who really did press his claims the most in the outfield players in terms of the friendlies in the last 6 months. I agree with you about the New Zealand games were where he did that. His combination in that front there with a couple other players was really, really impressive. And he started most of the games since I think D'Agostino might have started one. All the rest have been started by Mo Toure. So he does look like he's firming up to be the striking option going into the World Cup. I just wonder, Alex, is it as the backup behind Mitch Duke, who's still got that experience and his move now back to the A-League will guarantee that he's going to play football leading into the World Cup because the J-League, of course, are switching their seasons around. I wonder, is it as a backup to that, or is he now going to be that number one starting striker? Because it's the one thing that Australia still haven't been able to solve, have they? And look, in fairness, we didn't have it solved when we had a prime Harry Kewell playing for your club, Liverpool, and prime Mark Viduka playing in the Premier League alongside of him in terms of that regular, consistent international goal scorer. So it's a bit hard to ask a young guy like Mo Toure at the start of his career to do that, but he is the striker who has shown the most promise out of a whole group of strikers who have been called up. Obviously, Noah Bodic was called up, Segacic was called up, Milanovic got called up. All these players had their opportunity, at least in camp. And Mo Toure is the one who's taken it the most in terms of minutes on the field, and he does look like he might be the option going into the World Cup.
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting dynamic there because I guess that Mitch Duke and of course Mo Toure have very different qualities as well. You know, Mitch Duke is that guy that just loves a physical battle with the centre backs. He can hold the ball up, really intelligent, but he's quick as well. You know, despite his size and age, Mitch Duke is quite quick. Mo Toure obviously loves the balls in behind and getting past, you know, the offside trap and scoring with those sort of quick breakaways and the transition. And I think that's probably why I lean more towards Mo Toure than Mitch Duke for a starting role. But I think, you know, Tony Popovic can really use both of them either in combination or, you know, starting one and holding the other off the bench because they can both do jobs at different stages of matches. So that will be a very interesting dynamic. But you do feel that I guess both of those will be in the final World Cup squad, particularly if Mitch Duke's move, as you said, to Macarthur in the A-League as the J-League is sort of having a mini tournament as they change their season. So a good move for Mitch Duke, a sensible one, and one to Sydney where he knows quite well. And I'm sure Western Sydney Wanderers are actually spitting chips that he's not gone there because their striking department's a little bit thin. But anyway, let's not talk.
He'll play in Asia as well, of course, with Macarthur in their ACL2 campaign. So that's another really good thing for him as well. Probably why he did choose Macarthur over some of the other A-League clubs who were reportedly interested. He's got that opportunity now in Asia to test himself at a level where he knows. And if he's going to try and press the claim to Tony Popovic, I'm not sure playing in the A-League on its own is going to do that. So playing in Asia is probably not a bad way of doing it as well.
Yeah, it's actually a very intelligent decision from Mitch Duke and a really good one from Macarthur that really bolsters their squad, even though they've got a little bit of depth in that striking department. But as you said, the Asian Champions League 2 that they're playing in, they will need that depth because, you know, midweek games up to Asia and the long haul flights to and from will have an effect on their squad. But look, Tony Popovic's reign was, you know, filled with a lot of wins and draws and good results. But we went and played Canada and USA back in October, and that is where the undefeated streak came to an end against the USA in a feisty match. And little did we know that we were actually going to pull them, end up in the same pool as them, I should say, in the World Cup draw. And I don't know about you, but I'm very much looking forward to this game, particularly with the absolute dribble that's coming out of USA, with us being drawn in their pool.
Have they stopped talking rubbish over there yet? Because I've had to stop listening. I just can't take anymore. They've spoken so much stuff about a game that is 6 months away from happening, and they've got it booked in as a 3-0 win and moving on to their group stage game. It's unbelievable. I'm very much looking forward to that game. And as you said, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? If we'd known what we know now about that game in Denver in October, I think we would have all taken it very, very differently. I thought Australia played okay in that game, to be brutally honest with you. I don't think they played badly at all. And I think it was a very experimental side. I'm not sure that lineup will be the one that they do roll out in the World Cup. I think it was Matt Ryan, Guerrier, Chikati, Burgess, Italiano, O'Neill, Ballard, Boss, Metcalf, Boyle, and D'Agostino. I don't think that's the team we're rolling out at Lumen Field in Seattle in the actual World Cup. I thought that actual window, I thought Australia played pretty well in those 2 games. A good win against Canada and then a pretty good performance away to the United States. It wasn't a bad window. I think it was the November window where a lot of concerns started to arise, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly, and that leads perfectly into, I guess, what I want to talk about with your next, Scott, because those struggles against the South American opposition continued. What is it, 9 wins in 50 matches or something like that from memory, and particularly, I know a lot of people talk about the Colombia game, and because we lost that one 3-0, but my biggest concern was the game against Venezuela, a side that we really should have beaten, let's be honest. And you don't want to take any opposition for granted, but Venezuela haven't qualified for the World Cup, and South America is traditionally the toughest, I guess, World Cup qualification route. And when you're playing 10 quality South American sides, that is difficult. But that Venezuela side, very experimental, interim coach. Really, that should have been the one we won. And I mean, obviously, Tony Popovic was experimenting with his side as well, but I think that's where, as you said, the main concerns came about. And for me, it was largely the fact that when we need to take the game to the opposition, we're unable to do so. And I'm sure you probably share the same concerns as do a lot of people out there.
Yeah, that's exactly my concern as well. The defense, I don't think, was that big of an issue in that game. They only lost 1-0 to Venezuela. You shouldn't be losing to them at all, as you point out. As you said, it was a very experimental team. I think the commentary was saying they had 2 players with 15 caps or more. So it was a very, very young side looking to Generation Next from their perspective, a good result for them. But the Australian perspective, we just didn't create anywhere near enough, did we? And the concern is, you look at the players who played in that game. It was Ocon, O'Neill, Metcalf, Irankunda, and Toure in the front third. That's players who mostly we're going to see at the World Cup, and you want to see those players creating opportunities. I'm sure Tony Popovic was giving those players a chance to show what they can do and to create chances and potentially push his way in. But that's not too far off of players who we're going to see in the actual World Cup in June. So that was the real concern, that we just weren't threatening enough in that game at all. And that was defensively, I think Colombia was probably more of a concern defensively. Venezuela was a concern with the ball. And that was, I think we're starting to see there's the lack of a plan B with this Tony Popovic side. It's a little bit like the Pim Verbeek side back in 2010, where they had one way of playing and it was effective when it worked, but when teams found a way to nullify that and stop it, they didn't really have an answer to that. And I just wonder if Tony Popovic is going to have to spend the next couple of months really thinking of, right, if plan A doesn't work, what am I going to do? Because at the moment, against Venezuela and Colombia, there was a bit of concern there.
Yeah, I actually really like that point you've made, Scott. There's a lot of hallmarks to that Pim Verbeek side. I mean, that was the last side that got the automatic qualification. They played very effective football, obviously not quite pretty on the eye, but they used the resources they had in the side and got the job done. But yeah, as you said, once a team works them out or sits off them, there's really nothing there, and that is the big issue for me as well. But that Colombia game, I'm not too sure that we can be too harsh. I thought, again, I mean, the defense was quite solid. It's weird to say in a 3-0 loss, and that penalty was just ridiculous, and that's where the game changed. It was really soft, and I still don't think it's a penalty, and the reaction from Popovic and the players said as much at the time. But 2 late goals, and one was a bit of a mix-up by Paulito in the defence there. But the funny thing about the defence, and I'm sure you'll agree with me on this, is we haven't really had our first choice, centre-back combination, if you like, play. Ali Chikati's played most of the games, but we're still missing Harry Sutar. Cameron Burgess has been the mainstay. I think he's played 10 games this year for the Socceroos. Chikati's only played about 8 or might be 7, but that's the actually. I'd almost take that as a bit of a positive, wouldn't you? That we haven't actually seen our best defence together.
Well, I don't know if I'm not sure if Shakati and Sutar would have ever actually played together because when
Mm,
Sutar did his injury, so Shakati was still that young player at Palmer, so I'm not sure they would have played too much together. I'm very much looking forward to seeing that in March or at the World Cup. Those two at the heart of defence, because it could be sensational for the Socceroos if you think back to what Sutar did 4 years ago.
mm,
But I just to take you up on that, I do wonder if that Colombia game, it was a pretty strong team in that team was well, a lot of players you would expect to be potentially first string. Izzo was in goal, Irvine came into the midfielder, and it was Deganek and Burgess at the back. So there were a lot of players in that side who would expect to be a part of this team. And yes, there are players that come in. Chakati will come in, Sutar will come in, potentially Mitchuk comes in up front. But I do think that was pretty close to the best team we've fielded in a lot of the friendlies, and they were being okay. The penalty probably did set things off down the wrong path, but that game actually did give me a bit of more cause to pause, if you like, in terms of just trying to build up some sort of plan B. Because again, I don't think they were overly threatening in that game either. That was to me, that's my biggest concern. I think the defense will be fine. Tony Popovic, former defender, knows how to defend teams. He seems to always been good defensively. I'm sure he'll get that right. It's the other end where I just worry out: is there enough in the front third? And those two games, particularly Colombia and Venezuela, that gave me a lot of concern.
yeah, and look, I completely agree, and I guess it takes me to the point about the March international window. Of course, we've got that FIFA series. We'll touch on that in a little bit more detail after
You
this.
know we're playing yet?
No, we don't. I think it is sort of FIFA controlled. I don't think the Football Australia has any control whatsoever as to who we play. So that's really interesting as to who will be our opposition. I mean, there will be teams that come out and they'll be FIFA selected, but Football Australia has no say in it, which is a bit concerning. It could be good, it could be bad. We're really not sure. We're stuck in this sort of loop at the moment as to who the opposition is, and I guess we'll get to that. But what I want to ask you first of all, Scott, is that side in March. We're talking at the moment about the attacking third and the lack of a plan B. For you, do you pick another experimental squad, or are you trying to build, I guess, your starting 11 for that World Cup, or are you doing something in between, Scott, if you're Tony Popovic?
I think it depends on firstly who you're playing in March as well. If you're playing
Mm,
teams who are in the minnow range, it probably doesn't really serve well in terms of World Cup preparation. But I'd probably lean more towards I think experimentation time is now over. There were 6 games, 2 against New Zealand, Canada, USA, and then the 2 South Americans. I think that's experimentation time over. Anyone who comes in now, I think has to be for a very particular purpose. So if he's going to look at a Segatic, for example, it's got to be I need Adrian Segatic to do this, and I'm bringing him in to do this job. If he's going to bring in a Zach Sapsett who's scoring for fun over there in the UK, it's because I need him to do this particular job. I think experimentation time is now over. It's got to be about building up the plan A even further and also working on just little variations that you can use in terms of plan B. So I don't think he's going to deviate too far away from what he knows and what he likes. I think we can pretty much agree, Alex, that
mm.
Tony Popovich has his set way of doing things. He doesn't deviate too far from it. But if you can just come up with a couple of subtle variations that might surprise teams in the World Cup, they're the sorts of things I would work on in this window because I think in terms of our group opponents, we've obviously played in the US, so we don't need to worry about finding out their style of play. We've played South American sides. It lines up well. I'm pretty sure they'll play against a European team in the lead up to the World Cup over there in the US in June. So this is almost an opportunity where you just take what you get in terms of an opponent and you work on your way of play. You've brought players in now. You probably know 90% of what he wants to take to the World Cup if they're all fit and performing. So I'm just bringing those players in. Is that the way you kind of view it as well?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the experimentation is very much about, those plan B or those match situations. You know, you're 1-0 down, 20 minutes to go, you throw the kitchen sink at it. And what does that look like? Does that mean that you're taking Mitch Duke off and you're bringing Mo Toure on? You're leaving Nestor and Kunda on. You're playing Jordan Boss as a left winger as opposed to a left wing back. That kind of thing. I think that's where the experimentation is. But I think there is still definitely room for a couple of those key players, like an Adrian Segacic, a Zach Sapsford, Riley McGree if he's fit. That's the big issue with Riley. We'll pick up on that point a little,
Do you think
little bit later.
Valuplay could be a part of that as well? Because seems like he's so crucial in the early stage of qualifying for Tony Popovic. We were all shocked when he got called up. Like, where's this come from? He barely started for Melbourne Victory, but he played against China at home and scored, played against Indonesia and scored against China away and scored, although that one had a bit of luck to it.
Mm.
But he kind of was a bit of that link player in that front that are making things happen. And I do wonder if there's still a path there for a player like that, whether it's him or a Segicic or somebody else to come in and fill that role. I think that's the one thing that was really missing in the November window was that player at the front who just dropped off and linked things up and made things happen. That's probably the one big piece that I'm looking to them to find. Whether it's one of those two or somebody else, it's probably when the March squad is named, that's what I'll be looking for. So who's likely to fill that role?
Yeah, and I mean, Valuplay is not really in the discussion. It's almost as if everyone's forgotten about him. And to be honest, I'd almost forgotten about him because he's barely, he's obviously coming back from that injury with Melbourne Victory, and he's barely played any minutes this season. And then when you've got players like Segicic and McGree and Kunda who are doing all very well overseas, they're the ones you're thinking about a little bit more. And Valuplay gets sort of pushed to the back. But yeah, you're 100% right. He was actually really crucial in those international windows, particularly March and June. Really important for the squad. And yeah, there's 100% a space for a player like that in that squad, particularly given that lack of creativity in the front third. And it's just about what Popovic wants and who he wants. He knows what he's going to get from Valuplay, which in my mind probably puts him ahead of the pack, to a degree. And we've seen Adrian Segicic get called up in that September window. I believe didn't get any minutes on the pitch, but he's there or thereabouts. But I think Segicic is the one that has the real X factor in terms of his ability not only to create but the long shot. And I think the long shot, we don't really have a long shot expert in this squad, and I think that's probably what we're missing, particularly when we're going to face sides that are going to park the bus, Jose Mourinho style. If you've got someone that's a long shot expert, they're the kind of players that can break open those kind of defences. I'm not sure if you agree on that one at all, Scott.
Yeah, he's an X factor, isn't he? That's what he brings, is that creativity in the front third and the ability to do the unexpected, the things that defenses aren't necessarily thinking of and can't plan for. And that's really what we're talking about here is he can do a lot of those things in the front third. He did a lot of that for Portsmouth earlier in the year before he picked up that injury, which I think ruled him out of the October window, unfortunately. So if he can get back to full fitness, I wouldn't be shocked if they do bring him in to fill that role, because whether it's as a starter or as someone who comes off the bench with 20 minutes to go, as you mentioned, game situation, 20 minutes down, need a goal, he's perfect. Bring on in that sort of situation. So I wouldn't be shocked if he comes in to fill that role, or somebody else if he feels somebody else is better for that role. But that unpredictability in the front third, that's what I think they really need to find.
Yeah, and look, let's be honest, that's exactly what he did for Sydney FC last year. I mean, they had this is such a rich attacking options there at Sydney. They had Douglas Costa and Joe Lolly, but it was Adrian Segicic who was, I think, tied for the Golden Boot from memory for the A-League, and I think probably at least 80% of his goals were as a substitute. But then he's gone on to Portsmouth and had a red hot start, and now he's slowly coming back from injury. So he's the man I think that Tony Popovic has definitely got to have a look at in that match.
Do you think Socceroos might have missed his chance in terms of just the form a little bit too late? Because I think he could really fit a Popovic way of playing, but I just wonder if he's going to call him up, because we know Popovic does like to bring players in for one camp before he gives them a chance. Obviously, we know that Segicic didn't play in September, neither did Botic, Milanovic barely played. So I do wonder if he's going to get that opportunity, because you can see, you just said, strikers who can make runs in behind, he plays in wide areas as well. He can fill a couple of different roles. He'd be a really good fit, but I just wonder if he just slightly mistimed his run to make this squad.
Yeah, it's a good question. It probably also depends on how Moture and Mitch Duke get through the rest of this year. Not this year, this season. If one of those goes down, then that's the door wide open for Zach Sapsford. But you're right. I mean, the timing hasn't been particularly good for Zach, but he's doing absolutely outstanding stuff at Dundee United there in the Scottish Premier League. And I would hope that Popper brings him into the squad for this March window. But then again, Popper can't name 52 players, can he? So that makes it a little bit difficult. But I definitely think he's the kind of player that should be in the squad, whether he gets picked. You're probably right. I'd almost lean towards saying, without sounding like offensive, but I think he probably has left his run a little too late, which is it was disappointing because he's got the skill set, as you said, that a Tony Popovic striker really does. He's tailor made for Tony Popovic football, or Popper ball if you want to coin the
He's
phrase.
not too dissimilar to Juric, is he, when you really think about it? He's got the height, the strength, but he can also make those runs in behind, which is obviously the sort of play he had a lot of success with without the Wanderers. So, look, if he scores 15 goals between now and March, he's going to get picked, but I think you're right, might have just missed the window.
Yeah. It's all about timing, as we know with football, and it does feel like it is a little bit too late for Zach. But let's hope that that's not the case and that he does get picked, because I really rate him, and I think the fact that he had a really good season at Wanderers last season, but the fact to be able to go over to Scotland and adapt so quickly and be a crucial player for your side so quickly, and we've heard his manager talk in high regards about him as well, so in terms of both the work rate and the end product. So it goes to show, well, if it's not this World Cup, he's definitely one that for the future as well, as long as he stays fit and in form. Now let's move over to a difficult question, but I'm going to ask you, Scott, to pick your player of the year.
Oh, gee, that is a difficult question. You told me there wouldn't be any difficult questions here. Well, I think in terms of Socceroo performances, there were a couple of really good ones. Geordie Boss really had a good year. Aziz Behich had the moment of the year, but I don't think you can really give him the player of the year. Mo Toure did well in the friendlies, but I think you got to look at World Cup form and those games when it really did matter. I think Jackson Irvine, to me, he was crucial in so many of those games. So I'll give him player of the year in a field where there were some really good contenders. And that's probably the positive thing for the Socceroos is there were a few names there you could give that award to, but I'll go for Jackson Irvine.
Yeah, brilliant choice, and completely agree. Particularly that March window, I think was the one where we saw Jackson Irvine at his best, scoring crucial goals and really dominating the game. And unfortunately, he picked up an injury not too long after that international window, which set him back for the rest of the year. But we saw him come back into Socceroos squad, I think in that November window from memory, which was fantastic to see. And he's back getting regular minutes for his side, St. Pauli in Germany. But for me, I'd like to give a shout out. We talked about Matt Ryan earlier. That renaissance, he's got to be have a bit of a shout out. Paul Itso, I think, taking his opportunity when he got it. But for me, the man of the year has to be Alessandro Chiricati. Getting the captain's armband in that New Zealand series, becoming the youngest Socceroos captain in 40 odd years. Fantastic season, not only wearing green and gold, but also for his club side Parma. So crucial.
Did he captain them as well?
He did, yes. Just I think last night, local time Australian, but yes, first time wearing the armband for Parma. So really capping off, and his first game back from the latest injury, his ankle injury. So fantastic stuff. He's just having a wonderful year, and to be only 22 years old and doing what he's doing, wow, this kid is special, and that's why I'm going to give him my player of the year, to be honest. Just fantastic stuff. What a wonderful player, and I think he's going to be the bedrock for this side moving forward.
You can see him being the Socceroos captain in the not too distant future, really. Once this Matt Ryan led Socceroos era does come to him, possibly after the World Cup, he will be a young captain, but you can absolutely see him doing that. The leadership qualities he showed in that game against Japan, Parma are not going to give him the captaincy as a trivial thing. They must really believe he's got real leadership qualities. So you can absolutely see him being that future leader, looking ahead to the 2030 World Cup and beyond. Yeah,
definitely. And I think there was the video maybe after the Perth game, of course, being a local Perth lad. He spoke with such emotion about what it means to him to represent the Socceroos, and I absolutely love that because we always have those discussions about, and Alessandro could have well taken the different path and played for Italy. They could do with some good quality players at the
He's
moment.
closer than somebody else who wants to play for Italy, isn't he?
Yes, yeah, 100%. Italy would love to call him up, I reckon, just quietly. But the emotion he spoke with, it fired me up sitting on the couch at home. So I just absolutely love that, and yeah, I agree. There's some a little bit of Lucas Neal in terms of the leadership there for me in what I see in Alessandro. So absolutely fantastic player, and that's why he's my player of the year. Now, Scott, I want you to look into your crystal ball and tell me who your Socceroos player to watch for next year is.
Well, Takati would be one to watch in terms of him really solidifying himself as the rock at the back for the Socceroos. Mo Toure be another one you'd look at in terms of really, is he going to be the starter or that bench option? A couple others, well, we mentioned Segic, I won't go back over that. Satson with a complete wild card. The other one in midfield who has played a bit more over the last 12 months is Max Ballard, and he's made the move over to European football, and he's going pretty well over there at the moment as well. He might add something a little bit different in that midfield mix alongside a Jackson Irvine and Aidan O'Neill, a Connor Metcalf, and all these Ryan Teague. All these guys are pretty similar. He might add something a little bit different, a little bit more creative, and that could be something to keep an eye on. I think he would be one in the March window. If he starts and he plays well, I wouldn't be shocked if it lines him up for at least one start in the World Cup in a game where you're looking to be more on the front foot. So I think he's probably one that I'd be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, and talking about captains, another one that's captained his club side on and off. There in the Netherlands, NAC Breda, that Ballard plays for, and we saw that goal down in Canberra against New Zealand that he scored, and the emotional scenes of his dad. Absolutely fantastic stuff, and you love to see it. I'm going to stick with midfield and a player in the Netherlands, one to watch. I would normally say Adrian Segic, but we've talked about him. Let's go something a little bit different, and an old favourite of mine that I've mentioned on your podcast a few times, Scott. Aiden Hrustic, the man is on fire for his side at the moment, Heracles Almelo in the Netherlands. Wonderful left foot. He's actually playing a little bit deeper. He's playing in sort of a deeper holding midfield type role for his club side, but still hasn't affected his output in terms of assists. And I actually think he's the player that should be partnering Jackson Irvine in that central midfield role. We've seen Ryan Teague there. Unfortunately, had a bit of a false dawn in terms of injuries and the move to Belgium that hasn't quite worked out. But Hrustic's creative ability is the kind of player I think that can unlock that attacking third for us, and playing him in a deeper role will still allow you to fit a Segic in front of him, and Nestor and Kunda, and a Mo Toure or a Mitch Duke, depending on how Popper wants that to sort of look like. But I think he's the one to watch for me, and probably a little bit harsh that he didn't make that November squad, to be honest with you. But ever since then, he's been absolutely on fire for his club side and lifted them off the bottom of the ladder in the Netherlands and out of those relegation spots. So that's the one to watch for me.
I did think you would go that way because I know you mentioned it a lot on our show when you come onto our show. So that it's a little bit like when Marco Brociano went from that attacking midfield role late in his career, he dropped into a deep role, if you remember, and that might be, and you saw how effective that was in that Asian Cup run in 2015. That might be the sort of role he ends up playing potentially in this, if he does get into the World Cup squad in terms of that a little bit deeper, more creative, that link from defence to the front. So that might be potentially the role he plays. But I think that's another really good shout.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And the other thing we should mention too is his set piece quality as well. He's a wonderful on the corners, free kicks, that kind of thing. So it adds another different type of threat to the side. And I mean, he's picking up that defensive side of the game in that deeper role quite well as well. So that certainly helps out. Now, Scott, quickly, I just want to get your thoughts. If we were able to pick our opposition for that March international window, would there be anyone in particular you'd like to play? Like, would you want to play another South American side, perhaps, or another European side, considering that we will have a Euro qualifier in our pool as well?
I think if you're looking in terms of our World Cup group, we've already played against the United States and we've played against Canada, who would be the nearest representation to to the United States. I think we've covered that one off. We should be well prepared for what to expect from them. I think another South American opponent, if you could find one to come out here for that, maybe, for example, a Chile or something like that to come out and play, might not be a bad option. I do think if you can choose opponents, I'd probably go for one South American and one team out of Europe who missed out on the playoffs, didn't qualify for the World Cup, and didn't make the playoffs, who are as close to what you think those 4 teams in that playoff pool represent. Because it's impossible to know at the moment which of those 4 are going to get to the World Cup. You can have a thought on who might get there, but it's a 4-way race at the moment. So I do think at the moment you want one from South America and somebody who plays as close to that pool of European teams as possible. That would be my ideal combination. I'm not sure who those teams would be. That's the way I'd probably look to go with it. If you could ideally choose.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, South American opponent is a must almost, considering the terrible record we have, but being able to build some sort of plan, particularly for that Paraguay game, which is the last game of the pool. And, we really don't want to be needing a result in that game, if you ask me. And I'm sure you feel the same, Scott, about that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, if you can get a Chile or an Ecuador's got a great side. We have had a series against them recently as well. A great young side, really exciting. That'd be a great opponent, I think. And maybe someone, yeah, as you said, I agree, another European side, someone like a Hungary maybe, or a Balkan nation, maybe like a Bosnia and Herzegovina or Albania, something like that, might be similar-ish to the sides that are in that race for qualification there for the pool.
Yeah. Because this FIFA series it's for developmental nations most season as well, so it might end up being the Hungaries and the Albanias and someone like that, and then maybe not a South American, maybe a North American team who didn't qualify for the World Cup, one of those Caribbean teams that didn't make it, but they might also not that they're a comparison to a South American team, but that might be the sort of thing we might end up getting in this FIFA series. Because as you said, Football Australia don't have too much control over who they get.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of different ways that they might do it as well. There's I can't remember who was telling me, but there was someone. Basically, it could be 4 teams where the 2 winners of the 2 games play each other in sort of like a final, or it could be sort of like a round robin kind of tournament. So that's also another sort of interesting twist. But there will be 4, well, including Australia, there'll be 4 teams, but there'll be 3 international teams coming out here for it. So yes, it will be quite interesting to see who gets selected in that one. But I guess that's something for us to worry about in March, when we will probably next catch up for a podcast, either on yours or mine, no doubt. But anyway, Scott, we will wrap it up there, and I'll get you to plug your wonderful podcast, the Brisbane Football Review, again.
So Brisbane Football Review on Facebook, as Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, and our podcast, Spotify and Apple, as well as others. And you can look for it there. Just search Brisbane Football Review.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Scott. And you know where to find us, the Aussie Football Passport. We're on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly Twitter. And, of course, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon, YouTube as well. You can find us there. So thank you very much for your time today, Scott. Really appreciate you. The first guest on the podcast, and we'll have to do this more often because I quite enjoyed it. Hopefully the listeners did as well.
Great to join you on the show, Alex. I didn't know it's the first guest. That's a great thing.
No worries at all. A pleasure as always, Scott. Thank you very much. And that is it for this special bonus episode of the Aussie Football Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. Goodbye for now.